Hi, this is Eric from longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show. So last episode, I talked about how I needed to talk about more comics. And I am back today to do that again. So when I was thinking about this, I immediately thought of a few comics that are basically my favorites to read every month for various reasons. And as it turns out, these are 3 books from Image Comics. So today I'll be talking about Sex Criminals, Alex and Ada, and my favorite, Velvet. So first up is Sex Criminals. This is by Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky. I think that's how that's pronounced. Becca Kizzy and Christopher Sabella do the color flatting, not flattening, which that's kind of how my brain read that when I did, but it's flatting. And Thomas K. Why K and not an actual name? I don't know. Maybe K is, just the letter K. Maybe that is this person's last name. I don't know. Anyway, that's editing. Editing fail, maybe? I don't know. Sorry, Thomas K. And Drew Gill, finally, for production. I noticed that a lot of Image Comics have, production type positions, design or something like that. It always fascinates me to see these, and I often wonder what goes into this position, whatever it happens to be. So I'm really curious what Mr. Gill brings to this book. Just so you know, this book is for mature readers only. And I will be discussing things about sex and sexuality just in case you are not comfortable with that. Or if you are a younger listener, perhaps you should maybe skip that. Although if I say that, you'll just want to listen to it anyway. Anyway, about the book, Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky, what an amazing book this has been. So this is, I'm referring to issues 1 through 8. At the time of this recording, I just read number 8. Originally, I had purchased the trade paperback, which has the first 5 issues collected in it. And it was so good that even before I finished that book, I knew that I had to add this comic to my pull list. And so with issue 6, I started reading it monthly, or at least whenever it comes out. I don't even know if it comes out monthly. And then I also went back and tried to find issues 1 through 5 in the singles, which I'm still missing number 2. Plus, I bought the Image First. I think that's what they call it. Their comics for $1 introduction plan, and so I ended up buying that. And I kind of want to go back and find the first edition issues for 1 through 5. I think 2 of the 4 that I have are first editions, but I need to go check. So basically, if you're not familiar with Sex Criminals and you are embarrassed by sex or reading about sex or just embarrassed to be buying a book called Sex Criminals, I have to say you need to get over that because this is a great book. This is a great story. If you like Matt Fraction's Hawkeye, then I can only imagine that you'll love this just from a pure storytelling standpoint. So basically, this book is about Susie and John, who are 2 people that find each other. Turns out that both of them have the ability to stop time when they orgasm. There's a plot point where Susie is trying to save the library in which she works from a bank that is foreclosing on it because the library can't meet its mortgage payments. And then so John, I think, is the one that comes up with the idea of, because he works at the bank, and I say that the bank, imagine you're seeing this in print and the bank is written in initial caps because the bank becomes a presence in this book. And I'll explain more in a little bit. John comes up with a scheme to rob the bank, just a little bit here, a little bit there. It's little money that is barely noticeable from the bank's perspective, at least as John sees it. And Susie finally reluctantly agrees, and so they start robbing the bank. I think various locations, but anyway, they're doing this, but then they run afoul of the sex police, which are, so far that we've seen, are these three individuals who know what John and Susie are up to and try to stop them, to the point where they actually get caught by the sex police, but then Susie is able to free them, and John then declares war on the sex police, and things are escalating from there. And that's pretty much where we're at through issue 8. So just a little more detail. Susie's dad was killed when a person came into the bank, the same bank that John works in. This guy came into the bank. He was distraught over the financial collapse, and he was high on cocaine or heroin or something like that. Anyway, ended up shooting some people, including Susie's dad, who died, and then the guy jumped out of the bank window. So Susie already has an unwanted association with this bank. While she and her mother try to cope with the fact that Susie's dad has died, the mother retreats. She drinks a lot. The two never talk, or hardly ever talk. And that's when Susie finds out about her special ability. So she discovers it by drawing a bath, and she's in the tub while the water is running, and she has her first orgasm, and then she discovers that time stops. While trying to figure out what's going on with her, she starts asking a lot of questions of various people. She asks a gynecologist at one point about this without telling the guy, specifically what's going on. And it was very humorous, his response. Basically, sex is what happens after you orgasm and have sex. You fall asleep with your husband, is what he tells her. She ends up talking to girls that she refers to as, I forget if it's sluts or whores, either way. And one of those girls decides to help her out and tell her everything that she knows about sex, which is too much for Susie at that time. Anyway, that girl and Susie end up becoming roommates years later and best friends. Like I said earlier, Susie and John get together and discover their abilities. And they do so at a party that Susie is putting on to help raise awareness and or money. I'm not quite sure of that when I read through that again. Anyway, at least raising awareness for the imminent foreclosure of the library. And that's when John starts quoting lines from Nabokov's Lolita. And there's this cute little series of panels where he's continually quoting lines from Lolita in John Mason's voice. And if you're familiar with the original Lolita movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. Anyway, what's really cute though is as John is doing this, Susie is shown basically floating on the air. She's so enamored with this guy. So I thought that was a really cute touch. They end up having sex, and that's when they discover that they both can freeze time. They didn't realize that anybody else could do this, at least at that point in the story. And then for the next several issues or 2 or 3, we get John's backstory as well. He discovered when he was young that he could do the same thing. It's interesting because when he has an orgasm and stops time, his penis glows. So I should mention too, when they stop time, Susie calls it the quiet because everything is quiet. So no, there's no sound, there's no movement. Things do happen, like you can interact with computer touch screens. She says, fire is still hot, but it's cool enough that you can touch it, which that's a weird concept that I would have liked to have seen actually shown in the book, but she talks about that. John, however, calls it Cum World because that is the name of the porn shop that he would frequent while he was in, I prefer the quiet because I don't like saying Cum World. Anyway, while he's in the quiet, he would often go there. He said he must have stole thousands of dollars of porn from that shop over the years. And it's really interesting too. I need to talk about the art, so I might as well just start with this. The quiet, the way that that's shown is the colors get really I want to say augmented in a way. There's all these swirly wave patterns of blues and purples, and everything has kind of a glow to them in the kind of like the blue purplish range of light. So it's really cool, and very visually it's striking. You know that they're in the quiet whenever this is going on. It's just really neat. Other than that, the art in general is kind of cartoony. Has a bit of an exaggerated look in some people's expressions. It's not realistic, which actually I think lends to the effectiveness of the storytelling, because there is nudity in here. There are sex acts being shown, not to mention a lot of sex toys. But it allows for you to not take it too seriously because it's not drawn so realistically, I think. Or maybe that's just me. I don't know. So I think it works to diffuse the sexiness, if you will, or the sexness of the premise. But there's depth to the story and to the characters by the way that Fraction and Zdarsky are presenting things. So a lot of the story is being told, initially at least, from Susie's perspective. And so we get a lot of first-person narration from Susie talking about her past and what's going on in her present as well. So we get a lot of commentary, I guess is the way to put it. There's a scene early on in the book, in the first issue, where Susie, I think she's in grade school, finds out that her dad has been killed when someone from the school, the principal, I guess, comes to her class and tells the teacher. And the scene shows Susie at her desk doing her homework, and then we have the adult Susie sitting right behind her, looking at us, the audience, and talking to us, telling us about this moment, the moment that she knew that her dad was dead and that her life would change forever. And so there's that. But then there's this kind of like this wide view of the classroom with Susie in the background. And in the next panel, there's a close-up of the Susies in the panel as we're being told that she knows about this. And then again, we pull back. I say we, but the panel pulls back so that we see more of the classroom. But you got, it's not a traditional rectangular panel. It's vignetted, so it's kind of like this oval fade out, so that you get the emotional impact of that scene. At least that's how I took it. So you get this fourth wall breaking narration, like I said, that I think provides some distance and perspective. The vignette technique or the pullback visual that is shown, that gets used quite a bit for the quiet and powerful moments. And speaking of quiet, powerful moments, there's a point in issue number 8 where the sex police are getting back at John and Susie for what they've done, to the point where you find out that one of the 3 sex police, or at least it's strongly intimated that one of the 3 sex police works at the bank that John works at, and that this guy knows that John works there, of course, and that they use that information to basically screw around with John and Susie. Mostly Susie, because they send her a notice that the bank will forgive the amount of money that the library owes to allow it to keep open. And then next thing you know, the bank sends another notice saying, no, that was an error. We're going to foreclose. So they're just messing with Susie that way. But in the end of issue number 8, there's a scene where Susie sees something off in the distance and she goes running. And then we get narration from a few different characters, not Susie. No, I take that back. There is some narration from Susie. Anyway, so she sees something and she starts running off screaming. And it's like I said, the last 2 pages of this book, it's just narration, and you get to see the characters walking together and then reacting to what's going on. But there's no dialogue boxes. And so Susie's running across the street. John's following her. These other two characters are watching, and Susie's narration box says, "Those mother effers." Yeah, I'm trying to keep it clean here. And the last panel is John saying the exact same thing, accentuating the moment there. But John is holding Susie back, and she is beside herself. Her mouth is open. She's screaming. Her hands are out in front of her, like she's trying to claw at somebody. She's kicking, and so he's holding her back. And all you see in the final panel are the three sex police there, overseeing the demolition of the library building. With one of them, the main person, the head sex police person, just kind of waving a little bit, just enough so that our characters, the main characters of the book, know and see that she's doing this just to screw with him. So what's the importance of the library? So back when I was talking about, I'm going to jump around, and that's apropos for what I'll talk about here in a minute. The library was important to Susie because that's where she discovered that there was a wealth of knowledge in the library, and it helped her cope with what she was going through once she realized that she could stop time in the way that she does. Of course, she doesn't get specific answers from the library, but it helps her. And so she returns that favor, if you will, by eventually becoming, by eventually working at the library. There's another scene during the run of these 8 issues where a young girl comes in and she needs help finding some information for an assignment that she has to do where she could potentially meet the president. And Susie is just so grateful to be there to help this girl as the library, and the librarian that we were shown in a flashback helped Susie out. And that's another thing I like about this book is the use of flashback for the various characters. And not just so that we get a certain amount of the backstory filled in for the characters, but there are things that are shown in one issue that we don't get a payoff for several issues. Case in point, John is relaying a story about a time that he and his buddies went out to find some pornography that was rumored to be out in the woods near where they lived, and it was Halloween, and they were dressed up. Their faces were painted anyway, like the members of the rock band Kiss. And John, in passing, mentions that they didn't have one of the members there. And that was it. I think that was issue, I want to say 2. Might have been 3. But it's not until issue 8 where we find the other, or we discover the other part of that story, which is Robert Rainbow, which is a new gynecologist that Susie ends up seeing. And it turns out that Robert is the guy, the fourth person that didn't show up that night with John. So you find out Robert's backstory and why he didn't show up. So it's just, I love the layering that goes on here, where we get just little glimpses, little pieces of these characters, and we may not get something else until down the road. It just makes for a really fulfilling and rich story, which I think is just great. This book, despite the sometimes uncomfortable sex and sexual situations that are shown in it, it's just so much about characters and their relationships. It's just, there's just so much to it that's so enjoyable to read. I mentioned before how this book is for mature audiences, and in fact, it says on the back covers of the single issues, I have 3 of those. It says on the back, "For mature readers, duh." And each issue seems to have a different secondary message here. So issue number 6 has, it says the duh, and then, or for extremely immature readers like babies who will just chew on this probably. Number 7 says, "But it's totally cool if someone's just reading it to you, I guess." And number 8 says, "That would actually make for a great tattoo above your junk." And And it's not just the back covers that give you this kind of humorous takes on things, on sex and whatnot. You also have the letters pages, which at the very top of each page gives you sex tips, like, ladies, when faking your orgasms, don't forget to contrive a convincing backstory and family history for each, just in case he quizzes you later. There's also just the way that Fraction and Zdarsky answer some of the readers' letters are just hilarious, and they're very, very open about the sex that they've had, or at least a humorous take on it, and masturbation, and just kind of anything that they think will make a good joke, I suppose. Yeah, I can't even read some of these things because of the language. But it's really interesting. You get a lot more out of it than just the comic. The story of the comic itself. You get the creators and their particular style. And here's another sex tip before I move on. Denying your partner satisfaction can be a real turn-on for both of you. Blindfold your partner, tease them with light touches, and then move to a new city. Great fun stuff, but it really is. I mean, it's more than just funny sex stuff. This is a really rich, entertaining story, and I can't wait to read more. Next up is Alex and Ada, or Alex plus Ada, if you read it exactly as it's written on the cover. This is by Jonathan Luna and Sarah Vaughn. Jonathan Luna is a creator that pretty much whatever he wants to put out, I will read. And so this was no different. Alex and Ada is a story about Alex, of course, and he's a guy who gets a very special birthday present from his grandmother, which is an android who he names Ada. This is set in a future world similar to ours, but obviously the tech is more advanced. It could be our world, only 40 years in the future. I don't know. It's not explicitly stated, but it is a world in which obviously androids exist. They look human and can act human, but they're limited by their software. Only there was one company who produced this artificial intelligence, and the robots and androids in which this AI resided became sentient and ended up attacking their human masters, if you will, and there was a massacre. And so everybody is a little worried about this happening again. There is the other company that is talked about here a lot is called Prime, and Prime also makes this software interface. I don't know, it's weird. It's called Prime Wave, and so you get implants that allows you to connect to what I presume is that version of the internet in this story. And so not only can you access the internet, but you can call people. You can interact with your appliances and electronics through it, which sounds really cool. And the way they show this is that your temples glow a light blue whenever you're accessing Prime Wave. Anyway, so what happens here is, like I said, the grandmother gives Alex this android as a birthday present because Alex and his fiancée Claire broke up several months before this, and he hasn't moved on. He hasn't started seeing anybody. And Alex's grandmother has her own android, and this android not only helps her around the house, but also they are sexual partners. And so I think his grandmother wanted to give Alex this as a means to help him move on. Temporarily maybe have a relationship with this, or relations, I shouldn't say a relationship, but have relations with this android, and then, hopefully meet a nice girl and do all those things. So Alex reluctantly takes this android, but in his interactions with Ada, he decides to investigate the possibility of sentience for Ada. And so he goes to this online forum and gets introduced to some people, other androids, to help with getting Ada or changing Ada's software so that she becomes a sentient creature, which he does. And then the story then becomes about their relationship with each other. Ada notices that through some prodding from some other people that she interacts with in this special forum, that she has feelings for Alex, and perhaps Alex feels the same. So they actually do explore this a little bit, but then Alex rebuffs Ada because he's still not comfortable with the fact that she's an android. Not to mention that by the end of issue 7, and I forgot to mention that at the time of this recording, I have read issues 1 through 9 of this series. But by the end of issue 7, androids with sentience are illegal. And so while Alex did this 2 or 4, I don't know which is the proper term to use here, 2 or 4 Ada, before it became illegal. Now technically Alex broke the law, and Ada, if found to be sentient by the authorities, will be taken and probably destroyed. But as I said, Alex rebuffs Ada's advances, and so Ada decides that she just needs to go. And so she leaves, but she doesn't get very far. The people that are helping her they're walking together through this park, and then a police officer comes up, or a federal agent, I don't remember which. Anyway, some person of authority comes up and demands to see some ID and information. And essentially Ada ends up running away, but she's running out of energy. She has to get she has to eat some food to get some fuel, but she's afraid to do anything. She has no money. She's not with anyone to help her out. She doesn't necessarily want to call or get a hold of Alex. But she's running basically on fumes, and she collapses at someone's door, and it turns out not to be Alex as you expect at the end of issue 9, but she ends up at one of Alex's friends. Her name is Emily, at her house. Meanwhile, I think the very last, or one of the last things that we see in issue 9 is that Claire shows up on Alex's doorstep. So what happens next? So that's the basic plot of the story. One of the things, though, that I really like about this, so obviously this is a story about relationships. It's a story about identity, what it means to be human, or to be an android pretending to be human, or some variation of that. Where do feelings come from? In fact, Ada actually admonishes Alex when he says something about her programming. She says, you're the result of your programming too. It's just a different kind of software, which is a very good point. It's also about persecution, authorial persecution. It's very timely. It's very in the now with certain things that are going on in American society, at least. So there's all these really big and complicated themes in the story, but these things are offset by the simple way in which the story is shown to us via the art. If you're familiar with Jonathan Luna's style, I think it's a very simple, understated art style. There's a lot of the lines are really clean and simple. The backgrounds again are clean and simple, but it's very easy to connect with it. It really gets you, I think, emotionally. And the way that the art and the story progresses, it's like this not really. It's like a slow build-up of events. So there's not, like I said, there's not a lot of plot to this really so far, but over the course of this 9 issues, I don't feel like I've been slighted in any way with the story, because there's just so much to it, and the way that it's being slowly laid out for us. It's like having a 3-course meal, if you will, with this story. It's very fulfilling and adventurous and satisfying, despite the fact that it's taking a while to get through it. And speaking of the art, the covers are just amazing too. I mean, again, they're very simple. They usually feature one or two characters on the cover, little to no backgrounds, but very effective, very evocative. The very first cover has Alex, Alex and Ada in profile. You don't see Ada's face. You see Alex there, and he's kind of looking at Ada, looking down at her. You know, they're essentially the same height, but he's kind of looking down at the bottom portion of her face, her nose and her mouth area. Probably partially because she has this plastic over her head and draped down her shoulders and back. It evokes, a wedding veil. But it's this container plastic, this plastic wrap that she probably came in to some degree in here. But I mean, Alex does not look happy. He almost looks a little dismissive towards her, which does happen in the story. So it's very true to the events of the story. I just the wedding veil homage here is it's a wonderful image. Issue 5 has this is the issue after Ada becomes sentient and how she's dealing with that. It shows, which this is a scene that does not actually appear in the book, but it demonstrates what the characters are going through and how they feel about each other. So Ada is in pain, and she's on top of Alex, who's holding her on this bed, and their heads are together, so they're connecting, but they're not being intimate in any way. It's just one person is in pain, the other one feels for that person, and he's trying to help her. And it's very much, like I said, indicative of what's going on in this particular point in the story. Issue 7 features Ada showing her holding a mask of her face above her face, right in front of her face. And so that's all about the part of the story where she has to pretend to still be a non-sentient android when Alex takes her to his grandmother's to have dinner. And they don't want anyone, including the grandmother, to know about Ada's sentience. However, the grandmother immediately picks up on it, and things go from there. It's just a great image. And then issue 8 is the beginning of the end of their relationship, and you see the two characters together. They're closing in for a kiss, but their backsides are crumbling and floating away. So this budding relationship obviously is not going to last. Just great cover images. I love it. I love Jonathan Luna's art. And then finally, just to note on the cover, I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion that the title is Alex plus Ada. And, so that I really like that too, because that's like writing it like that with a plus sign. It's like putting your name together with your crush. So, Alex plus Ada. And it also evokes, when you carve your name in trees with, your name and either your significant other or the person you have a crush on too. I just really like that quality of the book. All right, now finally, my favorite book. I'm serious about this. This is the book that is probably the one book that I look forward to every month. It is the one book that I look forward to reading the most every month, is probably the best way to put that. And that is Velvet by Ed Brubaker, doing the writing, and Steve Epting doing the art, with Elizabeth Breitweiser doing colors and Chris Eliopoulos doing letters. This is the best spy book I have ever read. Granted, that's not a lot. I can't say that I'm an expert at this genre. I don't think I've ever read a spy novel per se, although I did start to read one of the Bourne books. Never finished it. I do like the spy genre. Mostly it's been movies and a little bit of TV, but this is much better than Bond. Think of Miss Moneypenny as the real spy, and that's kind of the story here. Velvet Templeton is the protagonist of the story. She is a former operative for this group called ARC 7. So that's like your MI5 or 6 or whatever it is that Bond belongs to. But now she is the secretary to that group's director. So she was an active operative in the 1950s, late 40s on through 1956. This particular story of Velvet picks up in 1973. So we're set in that timeline, which for some reason I find really cool. Well, really I like period pieces. This book would only be better to me if it were set in the 60s, because that's one of the time periods that I love to experience through movies and documentaries. But anyway, the early 70s is just as good to me as well. I think Brubaker in an interview said something about the paranoia of the 70s helps to inform this particular story. So I'll take his word at that. Anyway, back to Velvet. So basically the plot is when one of the ARC 7 agents, who is called X-14, his name is Jefferson Keller, is murdered in Paris in 1973, ARC 7, of course, hunts down his killer. Velvet is processing information, reports for the director, and then passing them on. While she's doing that, she starts to pick up on some things and decides that things simply don't add up. She orders up all of Jefferson Keller's mission files, and that's when things start to go bad. We find out later. Anyway, the ARC 7 agent in charge of the investigation finds that the killer is a retired agent who Velvet does not believe could have done it. So she goes looking for the guy. Unfortunately, when she gets there, she finds him dead and quickly realizes that she's been set up, because that's when the agent who is heading up the investigation barges in with his guys and his guns and tries to arrest Velvet. She gets away, of course, and then that sets up the story for the next several issues, where she's trying to figure out who killed Jefferson Keller and who set her up. Along the way, we get a lot of flashbacks, which seems to be a staple of this and Sex Criminals, not so much Alex and Ada, but anyway, this, of course, we get a lot of backstory, including the time that Velvet got married to one of the agents, one of the ARC 7 agents, and then found out that he was a double agent and had to kill him. Turns out, of course, that he was not a double agent, and that just sets up Velvet's desire to find out who's been messing with her, because it was that incident that caused her to lose it and no longer be able to be a field operative. And that's when the now director decided to ask her to be his secretary. At one point in the story, she starts to go after some officials in ARC 7, including the director. So she starts looking into them and trying to figure out which one of those guys would have the capability and knowledge to do what she thinks has been done to her and to these other agents. And at the end of issue 8, which is the latest issue that I've read at the time of this recording, she has kidnapped the director and sets us up for what comes next. So it's a great spy adventure piece, but from the perspective of the female operative, which I love that. In fact, I just realized that all three of these books have strong female characters in them, and I guess that's just something that I respond to. Great artwork by Steve Epting. This is some of the best stuff I've seen of Steve Epting's. And Greta and I don't have an encyclopedic knowledge of all of Epting's work, but it's killer work. It's realistic, as much as a comic book can be. It's genuine looking. It looks like he's done his homework as far as the time period goes. The vehicles and the clothing. The general style of the time or times, because he's doing flashbacks. There's a scene I remember set in the early '60s with with Velvet, and she's wearing an obviously 60s style dress, a hairdo. So he's doing a great job. Velvet looks like Velvet no matter what angle or time period that we're seeing her, which that I really appreciate. There's a lot of artists out there who can draw a really good drawing or a pretty drawing, but if you turn the character's head slightly, then it seems a bit off. And I don't really see that here, or at all, I guess, thinking on it, with Steve Epting's work. So he's doing a phenomenal job. The colors are perfect and not distracting. There are a lot of night scenes, so you get a lot of browns and blues in the book, but they serve the purpose of the story and are not distracting, like I said. In fact, if you look at the cover to issue 4, I believe it's 4. Yes, it is. So the top part of this cover has a close-up of Velvet's head, and then the bottom part shows a side view of her holding her gun. But if you look at that top part, she's wearing a mask because she's going to some sort of masquerade ball during the course of her investigation. And if at first glance it looks like a photo, that's how. And a lot of the props here go to the color artist. I'm not sure if that was Epting or Breitweiser, but the mask, it looks real. It really does. It's amazing the work that they're doing on this book. And basically in short, I feel like I'm reading a really good spy movie with this book, and I can't wait for the next issue. And I highly encourage you. This is out of the 2. This is the one book. I mean, Sex Criminals probably does not need any promotion. Alex and Ada probably doesn't either to a certain degree, but I know it's a finite story. I've heard that Jonathan Luna has an ending issue in mind. I don't think it's going to be a long-running story, but Velvet easily could be a long-term ongoing story, and I want to see that. I want to read that book for years to come, at least as long as Brubaker and Epting and the rest of the crew want to be telling these stories, because they're just really good comic book fiction. It's really good stuff. So I highly encourage you, out of these 3, to add Velvet to your pull list, talk about it, recommend it to your friends, if you end up falling in love with it, as I have. All right, so there you go. That's my look at Sex Criminals, Alex and Ada, and the pick of the litter, Velvet. If you are reading these comics, please let me know what you think of them. I'd love to hear from you. If you end up adding these to your list and reading them, and you end up loving them, I'd love to hear from you what you think of them. Or, if you read them and go, hey, Eric, you're just full of crap, these suck, I'd like to know why you think that. It's not, I don't think it's sufficient enough to say, this is a good book or this is a bad book. You have to have reasons why you like it or don't like it. Although I'll put more attention to the positive as opposed to the negative. Anyway, you can always contact me and tell me about your experience with these 3 books by emailing me at longboxreview@gmail.com. You can also leave comments below at the blog, longboxreview.com. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye-bye.